Okay, this is one of the problems I'm having with the landlord because I was complaining about the water quality, the poor water quality, black stuff coming out of the faucets and then black and then gray water and orange colors. But they said it wasn't up to them. That wasn't their problem. It was the government's, which is true. The government is responsible for the water purity up till it reaches this building. Then from there, it's the property owner's responsibility. And they're renting to a lot of people here, and they aren't disclosing because disclosure is mandatory, not just in law, in courts, but as far rental and completely. So they're not telling anybody about the impurities in the water, the black mold, the structural damage from all the water leaks. It's causing electrical problems. I had a couple fans burn out. I didn't have my power strips. But anyways, his lawyer called me and said that he's not responsible. He don't have to do this. He don't have to do that. They sent me a notice for eviction, and it was based on, first, the lawyer called me and said I wasn't paying the rent. And I told him I was paying the rent. I just refused to pay the rent increase or sign the lease until they make all the mandatory repairs, structural, for this black mold. And they fixed the ceiling in the bathroom. They replaced it so it wouldn't fall on my head. Now there's another water leak. But anyways, it's on the net. Landlords are responsible for fixing all that, legally responsible, and the lawyer's trying to tell me he's not. So if I agree to the rent increase and sign the lease, and what, then I gotta wait until, no. So he wants me to sign the lease and pay all this money first before they finish. And they refuse to give me any disclosure, anything. I want to report, I want to know if these are certified plumbers here, coming here, and if they didn't fix the plumbing. It's as old as the building. They didn't, no, they're responsible for it. The lawyer told me I filed for an appearance, I filed a waiver fee. I told him. I didn't have to tell him, but I did. I filed for a jury trial. Not a judge in a 6-man jury, but a judge in a 12-man jury trial. So he called me, told me I have to pay for it, which is false because I put in for a waiver of fees on that. He said the judge won't give it to me, but it's on the net. I don't have the money for it. I have a right to a jury trial. I don't have the money for it, so I put in a fee waiver, and he should give me the fee waiver as well as waive the court costs. That's the whole thing about waiving court costs. So this lawyer isn't telling me the truth. That's disinformation. Lawyers are not allowed to lie. Legally, lawyers and judges can't lie, not just in their professional life, but as well as in their personal life. They must maintain a certain decorum. And it's in the rules of professional conduct. So when I go to court, I'm going to take the rules of professional conduct and the code of judicial conduct and go over them with the judge and the lawyer thoroughly and have that judge cite that lawyer for filing a frivolous and fraudulent claim. But anyways, about the water purity, some kids here. Says judge sides with youth activists in first of its kind climate change trial in Montana. Montana judge Monday sided with young environmental activists who said the state's agencies were violating their constitutional right to a clean and healthful environment by permitting fossil fuel development while considering its effects on the climate. The ruling, the first of its kind in trial, the U.S. adds to a small number of legal decisions around the world that establish a government duty to protect citizens from climate change, which is in the public trust doctrine. That's mandatory for all democracies. In any constitutional republic, one must respect the public trust doctrine. It's law. And first, a youth climate lawsuit is being heard in court of Montana. District Court Judge Kathy Salini found that policy state uses in evaluating requests for fossil fuel permits, which doesn't allow agencies to evaluate the efficiencies of greenhouse gas emission, is unconstitutional. Judge Seeley wrote in the ruling that Montana's emissions and climate change have been proven to be a substantial factor in causing climate impacts on Montana's environment and harm the injury to the youth. However, it's up to the state legislature to determine how to bring this policy into compliance. That leaves slim chances for immediate change in fossil fuel-friendly states where Republicans dominate the state house. Julie Olson, attorney for representing the youth, released a statement calling the ruling a huge win for Montana, for youth, and a democracy for our climate change. Judge sides with youth activists and climate change in Montana. As fires rage in the West, fueled by fossil fuel pollutions today in Montana, is a game changer. It makes a point and save the planet from devastating effects of human-caused climate chaos, said Olson, the executive director of Our Children's Trust, an Oregon environmental group that has filed similar lawsuits in every state since 2011. Emily Flowers, spokesman for Montana Attorney General Austin, decried that the ruling as absurd and said the office planned to appeal. She criticized Seeley for allowing plaintiffs to put on what a Flower called a taxpayer-funded publicity stunt. Taxpayer-funded publicity stunt. Well, the taxpayers are doing what's in their best interest. What you are supposed to be legally be doing. All politicians, all lawyers and judges are legally required to do what's in the public interest. They are part of the public trust. When you read the public trust doctrine, you'll find that the legal system belongs in the public trust, which is the public's trust fund. And they are required to abide by the law, and part of the oath, they have to, maintain the public trust doctrine. Okay, Montanans can't be blamed for changing climate. Flower said in an email, their same legal theory has been thrown out of federal courts in more than a dozen states. It should have been here as well, but found an ideological judge. Because a judge, I can guarantee you, all judges, it's illegal. Judges are supposed to be apolitical, have an apolitical mindset. And it's in the Code of Judicial Conduct, so that's a clear violation. Ideological judge who bent over backwards to allow this case to move forward and earn herself in a spot in the next documentary. Attorneys for the 16 plaintiffs, ranging in the age from 5 to 22, presented evidence during the 2-week trial in June that increasing carbon dioxide emissions are driving hotter temperatures and more drought and wildfires and decreased snowpack. The plaintiffs said those changes are harming their mental and physical health, with wildfire smoke choking the air they breathe, and drought drying out the rivers, and sustained agriculture, fish, wildlife, recreation. Native Americans testifying for the plaintiffs said the climate affects their ceremonies and traditional food sources. I know the climate change is a global issue, but Montana needs to take responsibility for our part. Testified during the trial. You can't blow it off and do nothing about it. State argued that even if Montana completely stopped producing CO2, it would have no effect on global scale because states and countries around the world continue the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. Ready for offer relief, the state said, is not remedy at all. But Seeley said the state's attorneys failed to give a compelling reason as why they were not evaluating greenhouse gas impacts. She rejected the notion that Montana's greenhouse gas emissions insignificant are noted that renewable power is technically feasible and economically beneficial, citing testimony from the trial indicating Montana could replace 80% of its existing fossil fuel energy by 2030. Every additional ton of CHA greenhouse gas emission exacerbates plaintiffs' injuries, risks locking irreversible climate injuries, she wrote. State officials tried to derail the case and prevent it from going to trial through numerous motions to dismiss the lawsuit. Seeley rejected those attempts. A decision will soon be made in the nation's first youth-led climate lawsuit. Since its founding, Our Children's Trust has been raised more than $20 million to precedent lawsuits in the states and federal court. No previous attempts to reach trial. Carbon dioxide, which is released when fossil fuels are burned, traps the heat atmosphere and largely responsible for the warming of climate. This spring, carbon dioxide levels in the air reached the highest levels they've been in over 4 billion years. The National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration said early this month. Greenhouse gas emissions also reached record high last year, according to the International Energy Agency. July was the hottest month on record globally and the warmest on human civilization has seen, according to scientists. Okay, so this goes back to August 14th, 2023. Okay, so that's what, okay, they won is because, but nobody's mentioning the public trust doctrine, okay? So let's go there, okay? Public trust doctrine is a legal principle holding that the state acts as a trustee managing certain natural resources, primarily navigable waters, tidelands, submerged lands for the public benefit, use, and enjoyment. It protects public rights in navigation, commerce, fishing, swimming, and environmental preservation. Key aspects of the public trust doctrine. Core principles. Sovereign lands and waters are held in the public trust for the public, preventing them from being solely owned or restricted by private interest. You know how they got rid of that crocodile prison, or what was it? Crocodile Alcatraz, whatever. You know, it quite literally violated the public trust doctrine. Historical roots, these back to the Roman law, commonly property of all, and English common law. King as a trustee, adopted by the U.S. states to manage navigable waters. Protected resources, historically focused on water-based commerce and navigation. It has extended to include shorelines, access, recreational activities, swimming, boating, and ecological protections of wetlands and fish habitats. You know, so some rich people have been buying up some oceanfront property and fencing off. They can't. That's illegal. That's violating the public trust doctrine. State responsibility states, e.g., California, all these resources for the people maintaining fiduciary duty, protect them, and for current future generations. Evolution. The doctrine is not static. It is evolved to address modern environmental needs and frequently involved in climate change litigation to protect natural resources. Limitations. When public trust lands belong to the public, they can sometimes support permitted water-dependent commercial uses like ports or marinas, provided they do not conflict with the overall public trust purpose. The doctrine primarily enforced through these common laws, ensuring that resources like the Monaco Lake in California are preserved against over. But anyways, you have a right to clean water, clean air, you know, keep your lands clean, you know, because it affects your health. And if you read the public trust doctrine, overview of the public trust doctrine, okay, well, that's really small. I can't see it. Overview of the public trust doctrine. Oh, okay, I can't see that good. Legal obligations for clean water in U.S. primarily stem from the Clean Water Act, which prohibits discharging pollutants from point resources in the navigable waters without permit. And who would, seriously, I would not allow, if I were any of your state legislators, lawmakers, law creators, law enforcers, I would not allow anybody to pollute your drinking water, which mandates a public water system to meet health-based safety standards for tap water, okay? For tap water. My tap water comes out black sometimes, dark gray, light gray. Sometimes there's an orange tint in there. Sometimes it comes out really dark, like a gold color, and then it lightens up. And when I shower, the steam, it leaves these stains on the wall. When it dries, you can see these orange streaks. So seriously, people, I mean, this is happening all over America, you know. So you really got to get into that, the public trust doctrine. Okay, see more. So that's not all it covers. Okay, so you refer to the safe. So that's what these kids, but see, nobody's telling them that was their right. And nobody's supposed to violate those rights. That's deprivation of rights. You have a right to clean water, clean air. You know, the lands around you to be clean, non-contaminating, where it doesn't make you sick. You have a right to that. Who's enforcing those rights? See, so these are things I'm going to bring up when I go to court with landlord, because his lawyer is trying to tell me I don't have a right to clean water. You know? And then I put, let's see. Landlord, fix everything. Landlords are generally responsible for ensuring rental units are safe, sanitary, and habitable, covering repairs from structural elements, plumbing, electrical, and heating systems. They've been screwing with the heating system so much because I keep complaining how it gets cold in here, but they never let me get in detail where this cold is coming through, and it's through the front door. It's warped. I have, they told me put this weather stripping and, you know, put a towel or a blanket at the bottom of the door. It's getting, why do I got it? If they just, the door frame is tilted, the door is warped, and, no matter how much of this weather stripping I put in the door, I'm going to replace it today. Cold air still comes in. And so instead of replacing the door, they keep doing it. Sometimes it gets really hot in here, over 80 degrees. I don't like it higher than 72. I actually, even in the summer, when I put my air conditioner on, I put it on dry and I set it for 70, 72. It's the only comfortable temp. But the landlord's telling me they don't have to do all this. The lawyer laughed at me when I told him all I wanted him to do was make the necessary repairs. I wanted my rentable unit to be safe, sanitary. The black mold's not sanitary. All these water leaks and the ceiling nearly falling in on me while I was on the toilet. This is not habitable. Not habitable. So these are the issues I'm going to bring up, and I'm going to see to it, because this lawyer laughed at me. But see, I wasn't being explicit. He emailed to me. We would go back and forth, and he said, well, can't you? He's literally trying to give me, over the phone, we were talking, he was trying to get me to give him a date when I'd move out. And I told him I couldn't do that. And he kept pushing me for a date. And I know he when he took me to court, he was going to use that recording and hold me to the letter of the law. You said you would be, I'm not going to let anybody push me into giving an answer that I don't have an answer to. Because he could use that recording and anything I write in court and hold me to the letter of law on that. So when I replied to him in the last email he sent me, my last reply was that I can't give a guaranteed date, something like that. And, as soon as I find out, I get somebody guarantees me a place that I can move into, you'll be the first to know. And, you can guarantee I'll be out, something like that. And I said, you can hold me to the letter of law on that. And I was just letting him know. I know he's going to hold me to the letter of the law on everything I say. And that's what I'm going to do to him and the landlord. Hold them to the letter of the law. Hold them to every law out there. I am paying rent. I am entitled to a rental unit that's safe, sanitary, habitable. I am legally entitled to that. And they want to raise the rent without fixing anything? The landlord came here, and when he first tried to talk to me, I'm the new landlord, I'm raising the rent $150 here, sign the lease. I said, sure, after you make all these repairs. He said, I'm not here to remodel. I said, I didn't ask you to remodel. And I started telling him about this stuff. He said, I ain't got to do it. You just pay your rent. So I haven't paid. I paid the rent, just not the rent increase. You know, I never missed my rent in years I've been here. You know, so now is the time to press a countersuit. But first, I want to go to trial with this guy, jury trial, and to discuss with the jury the rules of professional conduct, the code of judicial conduct. Well, first I'll do that with the judge and the lawyer. They'll probably dismiss the case with prejudice. You know, but I'm going to go over. I'm not going to let the judge do that. I'm going to demand to be heard. This is a fraudulent and frivolous claim. This man should be suspended. He not only violated the rules of professional conduct. I says if you fail to report him, that's contempt of court in the very court you preside over, and that's also violating the code of judicial conduct because it's mandatory to report any misconduct, whether it's in the rules or the codes. Your failure to do that will put you in contempt. You are literally required to report yourself. If you don't, as well as the attorney, adding to this conspiracy against rights under the color of law, because all it takes is two people to create a conspiracy against rights under the color of law, and that's the landlord and his attorney, because his attorney is legally required to tell him if he's breaking the law, and he's legally required to withdraw from the case if his client insists on him breaking the law. Let's see. Lawyers are generally required to maintain strict confidentiality regarding past clients. However, they have a duty to inform clients of material mistakes made during representation, advise against ongoing or future criminal fraudulent acts, and may disclose confidential information to prevent reasonably certain death, certain bodily harm, or financial crimes. See, that's what's happening here. He's supposed to tell his client, "Hey, you're not supposed to do all this, and you're doing it. And you want me to take this guy to court and evict him because you're playing victim here. He's the victim, not you. I'm legally required to do what's in the public interest, and you know how many people live there? You could be hit with a class action lawsuit." That's what I would tell him. Duty to advise and prevent. If a client intends to commit future crime or fraud, the lawyer must advise them against it, explain the legal consequences. That's when I explain disclosure. I says, you can't rent these places, you know that. Disclosure is mandatory. And when you disclose to these future tenants that there's mold and water damage, structural damage, electrical damage, the plumbing needs to be replaced. That was one of the people that came out here. He told me when they replaced the sink and the faucets and all that. He said that the problem isn't up here. It's the plumbing in the whole building. It's old. It's antiquated. It needs to be replaced. All that stuff that's coming out, that's built up through the whole plumbing system. He says, so all he can do is tell the landlord. And I got a video of talking to him about that and showing the water. Confidentially versus disclosure, mandatory withdrawal. If a client persists in illegal activity, the lawyer may be required to withdraw from representation to avoid assisting in criminal conduct. reporting misconduct. While lawyers generally cannot report their own clients for past crimes, they have an absolute duty to report other lawyers who commit crimes reflecting on honesty, trustworthiness, or fitness to practice. There's no limitations on that. Any lawyer having any knowledge of any lawyer misconduct or any judge's misconduct are legally required to report it. Doesn't matter what court they're in, doesn't matter what state they're in. They have the knowledge. It's their sworn duty to report misconduct. Reporting misconduct is mandatory in both the rules of professional conduct and code of judicial conduct. Failure to report is misconduct, and not reporting is thus creating a conspiracy against rights under the color of law. They're depriving you of due process, fair trial, effective assistance of counsel. Hey, let's just face it. Your due process rights, your constitutional rights, your civil rights, your human rights, your rights as a U.S. citizen, your birthrights don't exist unless you know them. All right, people, I don't need luck. I know what I'm doing, but what I do need is company, and so that way I want witnesses because they're not going to allow electronic devices, and I want everybody to take a copy of the rules and the code so I can present you as my entourage, my proteges, so you can witness all the wrongdoings. And see, this happens in every court. This is a small court, this is civil court, this is eviction court. But see, all the wrongdoings happening in there, all the wrongdoings I'm telling you about, this lawyers doing. I have the proof, and I will present it to the jury. I will present it to the judge. You know what the crimes are or the penalties are for conspiracy against rights under the color of law? I can't leave here in good conscience knowing that they're going to rent out to somebody else without making these needed repairs. There used to be a young lady with 3 kids that lived next door to me. And then after her, there was a young man, a woman, and a small child that lived there. And they told me their stories, They can't afford much. It's not like they can find a decent, but this is happening all over America. And the last landlady told me that she doesn't have to do this, and I can sue her, but I ain't going to get much because she has an LLC, and it may be a crime, but she's not going to go to jail, and she'll just get fines, and she says she does this. Buys building, raises the rent, she don't do shit, sells the building because people like me complain too much, and before the government gets around to doing anything, the building's sold. But see, legally, when she sold the building, she's supposed to make arrangements with the future landlord to let them know, hey, this is everything that's wrong, and make arrangements and have all these repairs done and notify the tenants of the building. That's part of disclosure. And that's not happening. That's not happening, folks. So this isn't just about me, it's about we. It isn't about one, it's about all of us. Seriously. I hope you watch the whole video so you can understand exactly what I'm talking about. And a lot of different laws I'm going to be throwing out there. So many laws being broken, no matter what court of law you go into. If they're not living up to the oath, they're not fit for public service. You know what the penalties are for violating the oath? Denying you due process in its entirety, the whole court. So everybody can be charged with deprivation of rights. And in turn, what they did created conspiracy against rights under the color of law. These are federal crimes, y'all. I was helping people long before I had to go through this with eviction court. And we won. And that was just by talking to the lawyers before we went into the courtroom. I never said anything. People Few people said they were women, because lawyer, do you live there? She said, oh, he's my boyfriend. And the lawyer like, oh, you know. So I wasn't an occupant, but, and I was, I wasn't even a boyfriend or nothing. I just used to do kind of like hear things in the neighborhood, talk to people, volunteer my knowledgeable services, teaching them about the law, what can and can't be done. And just because you don't know, you'll violate your constitutional rights, any law out there. And the judge don't give a shit. In that court, that judge is king. They're above the law. The rule of law does not apply. So I have a vast tendency to use everything I could to crush the royalty of the courts, the king and his court jesters, by using the law. Okay, so I'm quite sure all this made sense to you, because I read it word for word to the letter as prescribed in the letter of the law. Saying anything other than what I said would be disinformation. Penalties for violating the letter of the law. There are penalties for disinformation. So I'm not going to risk that. I may not be a smart man, but I definitely ain't stupid enough to not do all this. Okay, I mean, even if I was a landlord, if I had the money and I was a landlord, I know a couple of landlords. This one guy I was talking to, he brags about, hey, anytime my tenants and this guy had some plumbing problems, I got a plumber there that day, because he was worried about damages, water damages, the long-term effects, it could cause electrical, black mold. See, he's the hype, and I talked to other landlords, nice people, and I have informed them about all this. So they can't get sued. They kept up with it, and they always claimed it on their taxes. I told them about that, talked to a tax consultant, and they can claim it on their taxes. So it's, hey, when you're a property owner and your property needs repairs, there's government grants, there's tax relief, but lawyers will be lawyers. Judges will be judges. And simply because I'm not a lawyer, they think they got one over on me. I started helping people in the 80s with eviction court. That was so that was so easy. I mean, if you know the laws, and you know all the laws that are breaking, and when you remind them the penalties of breaking these laws, they will do anything and everything to get out of that courtroom. This lawyer's trying to talk me out of going to court and asking for a jury trial and presenting this evidence and presenting all these laws that are being broken and presenting all the mandatory penalties, fines, removal from public service, and incarceration. Then I'm going to mention every law and every penalty for every law that they broke. And 10 to 1, once I mention going over the codes and the rules, the judge is going to go call for a sidebar, and they're going to come back out. They're not going to let me go back there. They're going to exclude me. And I have every right to be in on that conversation. But they don't like, it's been done to me before. In a civil suit, I won. But they decide, as soon as I brought up the Code of Judicial Conduct, the right to be heard, Canon 2, I forgot what letter, but, I have a right to be heard. And I use that right to be heard to go over the Code of Judicial Conduct with the judge. But as soon as I mentioned the judge called for a sidebar, everybody went into the judge's chambers and wouldn't let me in. Had their guard out there. Made me leave the courtroom and go sit outside. And sometime later they gave me voluntary non-suit. They had 1 year to refile. If they didn't, then it was dismissed with prejudice. It would be dismissed with prejudice. They couldn't refile. And they never refiled. And simply because I took the laws I knew and use them, and they won't even hear it. They won't even, but boy, once you bring up their legal obligations, their job descriptions, the code of judicial conduct, and the rules of professional conduct, and mention how this is due process. This is not a fair trial because I didn't have effective assistance of counsel. And there's so much to say. But this lawyer's trying to talk me out of the jury trial. Told me I'd have to pay for it myself. Look it up, it's on the net. I already did a video on that. But either way, folks, some people make snarky comments. No, I'm using, what they're doing is illegal, so I'm using the law to get them to obey the law. You know, and a lot of you that I talked to, it took you a little while to understand, but you literally need a law degree. You know, the legal knowledge of a legal seasoned professional, a member of the learned community, to be able to, you know, get due process. I mean, in the public interest, they're the ones that are supposed to be telling you. You know? All right, people, I'll let you go. Nothing but peace and love for you, all right? May your Creator always be with you and rain many blessings. I wish you a long life and good health. Man, nothing but love for you. You know, when it comes to my people, we the people, you know, y'all, mi familia, mi gente, mi amor, mi corazón. Te amo.